I feel for me, right before a show is like the moment where my eyes like begin to glaze over.
I think what really captivates a good performer is the story they're telling.
Now it's time to live in this one moment, like you mentioned, and only the people that were there are going to remember that one moment.
What I do when it comes to music, I let the emotion tell me how I feel about it.
Personally, I think that the emotional connectivity of a song is way more important than the technicalities behind it. It doesn't need to be perfect to be music.
Hey guys, welcome back to Simply Talk, a show brought to you by Simply Creative. My name's Andres Sarmiento, and I'm the host of the show. With me is Jeffrey Creightney, my co-host, and today we have Bryan. Tell the viewers who you are.
In my music, I go by Bryan Medina. I'm a composer. I'm a synth guy. I do like this whole like TikTok synth thing, and I have my own community there and outside as well. Basically, I'm an all-around type of musician. I have 8 years in the music industry. You know, that's a little snippet about myself.
You said synth. What is that? I don't listen to music in general that much. My car is always like, when I'm driving, there's no music in my car. A lot of people give me gripe about it for, oh, a black guy doesn't listen to music that much. And people will be like, man, what the hell is this? What kind of driving is this? Like, we're driving in silence. I'm like, we could talk,
Well, synths are like, so it could be either digital, so it could be on a computer, or they could be physical. And basically you create and mold sounds like from scratch. There are different ways to like sound design, whatever your needs might be, even if you're recording like audio for a movie.
They're electronic sounds that you engineer more or less, and they were very prevalent, or they became very well known in the late 70s and mid 80s. Like Stranger Things is an example, like arpeggios and just like all those sounds, but maybe you can clear a little bit.
100%. They've been around for a very long time, like since the 20s. That's, I believe, when the first one came out. They shot like electrical voltage through tube amplifiers and then ran it through like an organ, and then they were able to manipulate the sounds. So that's like where it was invented. And it didn't sound anything like it does nowadays, but it sounded really pretty in its own way. And then it eventually developed into that Stranger Things thing, but now like synthesizers are everywhere. Like you have them all over hip hop, you have them like all over rock. It's very hard to find a new song that doesn't have a synth, whether it's like a computer based synthesizer or something like physical. Even synths are used on people's vocals to help tune the production. So that's like auto tune is its own like synthesizer.
I think that's why there's so many people dabbling in music nowadays, because it's become, I think, thanks to synthesizers, it's made it a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, I mean, what I find to be the most accessible instrument and probably the most practical is the computer. It's like you can do anything on it, and it doesn't need to be perfect to be music. But the computer does a really incredible job at being perfect. And so I find that the hardest part of it is getting imperfections inside of the computer. But nonetheless, that's how I mostly write my stuff. I normally just write it out on the computer, and then I physically, like as a demo, I write it on the computer, and then I physically record everything and I play everything. So I have the arrangement done. It's always going to be a synth, even if it's like real drum sounds that are sampled into a computer. It's going to be some type of synth playing it back, or some type of virtual plugin. And so initially, like I like to start, not in every song, but I do like to start on a computer and then work backwards into like the real world, or I like to actually perform it out. So like record myself playing all these things and turning it into a song and taking the best snippets of it and connecting them.
You said something that kind of like triggered a thought process, a perspective that I always use when it comes to music. I wish I could play music the way you play or other people play, but I have a huge respect for it, because for myself at least, I see it as a language. I guess my side question is, do you think knowing each individual's instrument's language helps you construct a more clearer vision of what you want to put out musically?
It definitely helps me put out a clearer image of what I want. But I think the most important part of the musical language is the same as every other language. Even not understanding, for example, how to speak a language, you could still understand someone's emotions through it. Personally, I think that the emotional connectivity of a song is way more important than the technicalities behind it. Now, the technicalities help me get to a place, but that place will never be defined without the emotion.
You said something earlier. I thought Andreas was gonna go mention that. I thought we were like kind of thinking the same thing. Maybe you were, and you just were gonna ask it next. But you said the toughest part about using computer is putting imperfections into it when you're making music. What do you mean by that when you say that?
Me personally, I never like something to be perfect. Like a computer could be very perfect in its timing and its pitch in everything. But when you physically record an instrument, no matter how close you get, you're never going to be 100% of the way there. You know, you could count 1, 2, 3, 4, and a computer could get that perfectly like within the intervals. You know, like it will be absolutely perfect every time, and you can write it in so that it comes out exactly where it's supposed to be. But when you listen to like music that was recorded back in the day, the computer wasn't around, and like imperfections, they weren't really looked at as imperfections. Like nobody really thought of, oh wow, like this isn't on a musical grid. Like back in the day, they were like, oh, this sounds good. And even now, like for example, I was hearing Dua Lipa's record, which, what is it? Levitating. That song is tight. Like everything is on the groove. You know, you could tell that it was made in a computer, but humans had a touch in it. You know, they were playing the instruments. It was recorded and re-recorded. And like, this is my personal belief. I would allow some parts to be absolutely perfect in its timing. I would never allow everything to be perfect, because then that takes away the
human element.
Yeah, it when it's perfect, it adds a layer of predictability, but you could also get a layer of predictability while still being creative by actually playing an instrument.
I think there should be there's a clear difference between predictability and familiarity, because something can be familiar and nostalgic, but predictability can be labeled as something negative.
Do you feel like that might be something that is kind of lost, that imperfection that you talk about in music today?
That is something that I saw transition to, right? Like nowadays, I feel like people are leaning more to the philosophy that I have, where things don't need to be predictable to feel familiar, like how Andres said. And I like to call them the 2004 to 2010 range. People had this idea that everything had to be on a grid, like absolutely perfect. You know, we will use a computer for everything. Slowly, people started saying, but wait, like, what if we go back a second and like look at this in a retrospective way? And I feel like music since then has felt more creative. Like even modern rap, like back in the day, rap was like very perfect, like trying to be, you know, solid on the beat. Now you hear like samples thrown in everywhere that are not perfectly in time. And like a song can be fun if it's catchy, but is it its own?
So that kind of answers my question in a nutshell. So that basically, yeah, you would say that today music has more imperfection than it did maybe 10 years ago. I was listening to music back in the early like 2000s and 2010s. Then I kind of fell off on it, but maybe that could have been one of those factors. Maybe because it's like, for me, it just was like, this is different, but it's maybe not appreciating those imperfections that you talk about now. I'll have to really look at that now when I turn on the radio. Whenever that day will be, I'll have to really like listen.
What I do when it comes to music, I let the emotion tell me how I feel about it. Like it sounds a little like repetitive on its own self, but it should like ignite some sort of emotional reaction for you to be like, oh my God. For me, you should know what the music is about before you even look into the lyrics. I think when a song is like, let's use the word intimately constructed, they also consider, how am I gonna portray this emotion with this sequence of musical instruments?
You don't need to speak the language to know how someone feels. You know, if you like the song in 10 seconds, you might not know 100% like what it's about or what the lyrical context is, but it makes you feel a certain way. Even if the music is in another physical language. Like when I discovered Stromae, he's a French artist. He doesn't sing in English, but I felt his maybe not his emotion, but my interpretation of what the song was through the song itself. My philosophy is a good musician doesn't need to be a professor at it. You know, you might just know one chord, but it's really what you do with it that counts.
What does music mean to you?
Well, to me, it's like my primary language. Like last night, I played a show, and when I perform, I forget words. I don't think in a way that's like in English or in Spanish. I think in a way that's like in its own context. There's like the combination for me of different things. There's the technical, the emotional, the performative, and I'd say the insecurity of it too. And that's the old mentality of like I play jazz, I gotta be spot on and do this like fancy music theory thing and this and that. And when I'm there on stage and afterwards, like I've grown into this idea that I do not need to show off. The audience isn't here to watch anybody show off. They're here to have a good time, to enjoy and to feel what you're doing that night. And I think that that's why my performance has gotten better in the aspect of performing. And last night it was a synthesizer battle. So that's like bread and butter for me.
I think a good performer doesn't necessarily just perform. I think what really captivates from an audience perspective, a good performer, is the story they're telling, going back into the whole language and all that stuff. Like you mentioned jazz can become very technical and very by the book to an extent. But when you're looking at live jazz or even just jam sessions, what I admire about those sessions is that they're using a song as a reference point, but they're overall communicating with each other. The drummer talks to the keyboardist, the keyboardist talks to the guitarist, and it's just like this, like, what are we doing next? Like, oh, you want to do a solo? Cool. I'll cue you. Okay, you're done. Cool. Let's go back at it. Oh, I feel the drum wanting to get something out. It's like it's a beautiful conversation, which is why I keep saying that I love watching it and enjoying it. So I think above all, it's a form of storytelling.
What I like about improv, for example, is that it's spontaneous, but it's spontaneity of ideas that you've already started developing or have developed fully. It's like not only is there like an ebb and flow within yourself of which ideas you create, how you solo, but then you take others into consideration. And that's the type of like live that I admire. It's just communication between amongst the musicians, amongst the audience, like amongst yourself. It's like and it doesn't have to be with words. I think that same principle applies in film, where you can have a film that looks absolutely beautiful but doesn't touch emotionally on a level. But then you can have a film that looks terrible but that speaks to people very well. Sometimes we get too caught up in one aspect of it to realize that whatever art you're in, you're telling a story or sending a message.
Did you ever feel at one point like any nerves when you would be like presenting your music? Because true story with me, I tried to learn to play a couple instruments. One in high school, the trumpet, and again, back to language, couldn't understand it. And I'd get nervous every time we would have to play whatever we would need to play during class for our assignments or whatever. My hands would be shaking like a leaf. Tried to play the guitar. It drove me insane. It drove me up the wall. Just the freaking frets and all of that, and my finger getting all jammed up, my wrist. Like I didn't work the muscle. I didn't realize how much work went into it, but it always made me nervous anytime I tried to play. So I wanted to know, like, was that something that ever like you experienced when going up on stage? Because playing in front of people can be, for me, terrifying if you don't know the language, like you say.
First of all, I 100% agree that nerves are a real thing. I guess it's developed over time where like back then I was scared of playing in front of people and like being like, oh my gosh, like what are they thinking? Like I guess with confidence and enough practice, like assurance within myself, it switched more, I guess, a few years back to I'm nervous because I'm about to be in front of a crowd of people. And then now I don't get stage fright anymore. I've gotten comfortable speaking to an audience and performing in front of an audience where that nerve isn't there. But where it did switch to was when I release my music. There, I'm super nervous. On a stage, it's like, it's the equivalent to one event. If it's never recorded, it'll only live on in a certain amount of people's minds. But in a recording, you can find that recording 10 years from now, and you could be like, man, like I will have to live forever with that one mistake that I did that nobody else hears, maybe, or that everybody else hears. Will I ever really know that one thing in that one little tiny point of time that got recorded, released, and like people have listened to, like, will I ever really feel comfortable accepting that happened?
To close on that topic, I mean, I don't think nerves are necessarily bad. I think they're a tool that we learn to manipulate and to redirect. I don't think you're ever not going to be nervous before a show or before a release. You learn how to turn it into motivation. Like, what is your experience with handling your nerves?
I've learned that I'm lucky enough that I work best under pressure. When there's no pressure, it's like it doesn't feel exciting. If there's a lot of pressure on a situation and I feel that it's important, then that's the one that I hold the most value to. Like I put a lot of weight on it. That weight is exciting. And I feel like that's what's happened to me over time. Like you can get, I guess, as used to being nervous as possible. Feeling excited is really why like I kind of broke through those nerves in the first place, because like once you get past that, it's a rush.
That is true. It is a rush. You can equate that to theater also. Like if I'm on a theater stage, I'm in my own element. The light's bright. I can't see all the people out there. I know they're there. I can feel their energy, but it's home for me now. It's like I did all the work I need to do. And now it's time to live in this one moment, like you mentioned. And only the people that were there are going to remember that one moment. Yeah. If I make a mistake, it's whatever. 99.9% of it will be flawless in my mind.
For me, it's like when I'm there, I feel like I'm in a Zen state almost. I really appreciate that specific moment in time. Like, I don't know if this happens to you in theater, but like if time ever just either slows down to the point
Absolutely.
Where you're like hyper focused, but you also feel like in this really peaceful place. And then when looking back at it retrospectively, you're like, man, that was really fast. But
it is. It's always that way.
I've done a musical theater show once, and I don't know if it's the same with you, Jeffrey, but like 5 minutes before curtains go up, everyone gets in their place. You're trying to sneak a look of how the stage looks and how many people are watching. Like those are the moments that how you, Bryan, described feel like the longest, like you're encapsulated in this moment in time that no one's recording. It's very special. And I don't know, like you guys were talking about theater and it just kind of like brought back memories of when I was in the Heights and I was just one of the ensemble, and minutes before curtain went up, you just feel this adrenaline. You hear the crowd, you hear people walking in and out. It's nerves. Like we keep saying, it's the nerves starting to build up. And from there, it's your job to kind of like, all right, I'm going to use this to like embody the character, or embody the portrayal of what I'm trying to do in this moment to share with the audience. I don't know. It's honestly a beautiful thing.
It takes you somewhere though. But in that moment, I'm like, still, I'm embracing every moment at that point right then and there. And time does slow. They're moving fast, but everything for me is like calm in a sense. And I don't have to look out the curtain. I can feel the people coming in. And then curtains open up and then we start doing our thing and they give me more.
I feel for me, right before a show is like the moment where my eyes like begin to glaze over. Like it's all the things at once, right? I feel like once I start performing, that's when time slows for me. It's like at that moment, I feel like my eyes aren't my primary sense. My ears aren't, my touch isn't like I literally can't smell anything. I feel like everything becomes like this point of like extreme hyper focus into like
tunnel vision almost.
Yeah, like to the point where I feel like I could barely see anything in front of me, even though I'm looking at things and playing them and doing everything. When I perform live, I play only 50% of what I'm capable of. Once you get past that point of like, you go to like 80, 90, 100, because at live, I don't just play one instrument. I play all of them. So I play drums, bass, guitar, keyboard, synth, vocals, like all of that is done like all at once. So I feel like when I go to like that 80 or 90% margin of really pushing the limits of like a singular instrument, it detracts from everything else. Where back then I used to like, for example, like doing guitar solos. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, that is not important anymore. And I don't personally like them. Yeah, I love it. That's my favorite feeling in the world, when my eyes just glaze over and I feel like I can't see anything. And I literally just can't remember what's going on throughout the performance. Like it feels like if my already bad eyes took off their glasses.
There's a quote. I don't know if you heard this quote. It's they said the eyes are the window to the soul. They say it in film.
I've heard that.
And you could say that with music as well, just like how you described it. But I wanted to talk about your TikTok. I try to glaze over it a little bit. And you did mention something.
So I tend to put things that I think of at the moment, because when I put too much thought into a TikTok video, I'm like slightly disappointed because I'm like, and there's so much effort that went into this. I like to listen with my ears and my mind. For me, like I see a lot of color when I see music. Like I visualize all this color and environments and like I set up specific scenarios and scenes and angles. But I also do that when I listen. I don't like imposing those scenarios on people. Like I like for them to come up with their own. For me, that's like the part that I really appreciate. Like if you look through like the comments, it's like one person, one of those videos was like, oh, I imagine a horse running in a field. And then the other one is like, I imagine an intergalactic war where like this and that. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't look at the comments, but now I'm going to go back and read them.
With all your experience that you've had so far with this platform, like what would you say to the newcomer that wants to attempt reaching that audience base successfully, if anything?
It will come eventually. I started with 17 followers in December. By February, I was at like 150, and then like it went from 150 to 1,000. Then it stayed there. It was like like I'm putting out so much content, so much effort, and then literally in the span of a week, I got a video that landed like 1.3 or 1.4 million views that week, and then that shot me up a lot. That video, I was lucky enough to use my own sound because I turned that into my song. That's how my music started becoming popular elsewhere. Not just like on app, but in other places. The last podcast that I did, I was like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm like, I'm about to reach like 10,000 followers. Now you're at the mercy of the platform, right? It's not like on Instagram where you're at the mercy of yourself. Like on TikTok, you're at the mercy of the platform. Period. Every post is weighted on its own individual basis. Some things people really like, some things people like not as many can relate to, and I think for now I'm fine with that. There's a difference between dedicated fans and casual listeners, and like I feel like the really big ones are for the casual listeners and the dedicated fans, but the smaller ones are for the dedicated fans, and that's why they stick around.
I think to put the seal on this package is you just got to keep doing it, keep perfecting it, because eventually, like you said, they'll come. You just got to make sure you're working on your craft, because that essentially is the keystone of the reason why you're doing what you're doing. I think
this was actually fun. I feel like I learned some stuff today that I didn't know before.
It opened up your mind.
It did musically.
Good job, Bryan.
Thanks, man. Every musician has a different perspective. I have a very like weird perspective of music. I feel like if I had maybe like a 5-hour podcast, I could get into it. But I think in 30 minutes, this was perfect.
And it's going to be probably a little shorter because I'm going to be taking out the and whatevers and yeah, you know, the limbo.
As long as you let the world know that Jeffrey wakes up warm, like ready for anything. Like
I wake up sweating already, bro. That's how warmed up I am. Shit.
I work out of my sleep, right?
Yeah. I do 30 sit-ups just to get out of bed.
Oh man, no, that's terrible. You just gave me like a headache just now.
Damn, pulled out a tear. Put that shit on the director's cut. Where can we find your music? Both on TikTok and any other platform that you're based off of?
Basically, all the streaming services, you know, Tidal, YouTube, all of those I'm on. I believe my music is now being distributed to SoundCloud. I'm not sure. For like really hardcore music fans, I'm going to start releasing all the stems. So like all the different audio files in my music, and I'll put that like on my website and have them like, you know, just like sign up for them, and then they could use them and sample them in the way that they want to.
And what's your TikTok handle?
It's Bryan Andrew Medina, because I was like, what's a creative artist name? And then I was like, I'm not creative.
Come on. We all know that's not true. To kind of prove it, I'm going to make you answer this question. What's creativity for you?
Dude, creativity is an endless void of absolute hatred. And
sounds so romantic.
That's a loaded question, Andres. What is creativity for me? Creativity is the ability to react.
Hey, I like that.
I like that too.
That could be a little Christmas card. Nice.
And the ability to respond. They're two different things, but the abilities to act and respond.
What about you, Jeffrey? Has your perspective on creativity changed, or you're still that 5-year-old boy?
No, it'll never change. It will never change. Creativity will always be that for me. Remembering that 5-year-old kid.
Awesome.
What did that 5-year-old kid want when he wanted to be creative?
I was 5 years old when I had my first push up.
Oh, he's not gonna let that go. He's never gonna. I'm gonna meet him in person, and he's gonna do a sit up just to make fun of me, bro. Oh man,
Oh, yeah.
I like it though. It's awesome.
That was great.
Thank you guys for tuning in as always. Thank you for listening.
For everybody that's listening, I appreciate you. Hopefully you got to learn something new and be entertained at the same time. And hopefully, you'll be able to look back at this in a series of podcasts and say, wow, we've improved.
That's important.
A year from now, if we're having the same conversation, let's hope that that's the case. Like, wow, we've improved, or wow, we're here in person talking in the same room.
Book it. We're booking it. Book the date, Andres. The date and the time and all of that.
All right. Well, yeah, that's awesome, guys. Thank you guys for watching as always. I hope you guys enjoyed this segment of Simply Talk with our awesome guest, Bryan. And remember, don't sweat too much in your sleep.